Hey guys, Palsteron here, and today let's talk about all the updated guides that I have for 3.25. They will all be over on Maxroll, and whenever this video is out, they should be updated. Now, a few things at the start. First up, some people thought that maybe Caustic will come back with the tinctures and whatnot. Right now, we don't know, but most likely not, because ranged builds currently cannot even use tinctures unless they go Warden. So everything poison related is not going to go Warden. You can't go Pathfinder anymore, so yeah, I don't know why they just gave melee that. Melee got already crazy buffs, but yeah. Tinctures are back for melee unless you're Warden, so no Caustic. Now, another clarification, something I've heard quite a bit, is that the Maxroll guide and the PoB are not in sync, and I can tell you exactly why. The older the build guide, the more they are going to be separate, because there's so many things changing every patch. And the way making this works is not just simply me copying a PoB in, right? The PoB is completely separate. So I have to basically double check every single time, and it just does not work. It's just not scalable. It's impossible. The Maxroll side is made so you can use only this without having to use the PoB. That was kind of our goal, right? So the PoB is merely something where you can kind of estimate your damage, or you have something to cross-check. It is not something to replace all of this with. That is why we made it in the first place, right? Everything here is set up so you can kind of use that. The progression tab, right? Just to address that. Now, before I even go over all of these changes, every single build on this list is nerfed. Every single build here got nerfed. We're going to go over everything. Now, are they unplayable? No. The unplayable builds get unlisted. It's not an issue. It's like one click, but they're still playable. However, these are compounding things, right? If this happens over and over again, at some point they're not going to be good, and then they're going to be unlisted. But if that happens, I'm going to put an update video. But with that out of the way, first let's talk about Hexblast. I recently made a Hexblast of Contradiction video a few weeks back. I tested this one. This was the build I wanted to play for this league. I had it prepped, everything. They did just straight up remove Divine Blessing. So if you guys don't know that build, it's basically a Hexblast version, but with the Transfigure gem, and it uses Inquisitor and Ignore Res and stuff like that. And Divine Blessing was a big payoff that is now just gone. It was already very close to Hexblast, but without Divine Blessing, it's basically like having a 5-link Hexblast. We lose Zealotry. So yeah, I don't think there's any reason to play it. So if you want to play that, you could follow what Captain Lance is doing with Energy Blade or whatever. But the version that I had is basically dead in the water, and you can forget about it. All right, biggest change out of all of these builds, I had to rework the Hexblast from Sabo to Trickster. I know a lot of you guys already like the Trickster version. Ventura's Trickster version that he played multiple times was really, really solid. In endgame, it's way tankier. I already kind of alluded to respeccing to Trickster in endgame. But for League Start, I will tell you exactly why I loved Sabo so much. It was Eldritch Battery. Being able to spam your mines, I will die on that hill. I just will. So you can't do that anymore, though, because one of the payoffs of Eldritch Battery was Divine Blessing, which got straight up removed. Another reason why Saboteur got so much worse is because now the way to play mines is automation support with detonate mines. Blast Chain Mine is basically dead in the water because automation makes it so whenever it procs, it resets the chain. So you have to go High Impact Mine, which then in turn means that in theory, Demolition Specialist is still good, but with how fast everything explodes, you don't even want detonation speed anymore. It detonates way too fast on its own. So the increased aura effect from mines just doesn't give you what it actually says here. It's kind of like a fake multiplier. And those two changes basically led to the rework. And Trickster is still absolute. It's great. Hexblast is so goddamn strong. But this is something you have to understand. Now, for people that didn't like this build because it was too squishy for them, now they're going to have a little bit of a better time in that scenario. But there are some downsides to it. You now have to use a Mana Flask, which I'm not a fan of, but it is what it is. You need to get minus mana cost on Ring. Most likely, maybe you can get around not having to use it. In this version, for example, I don't need to use it, but it is something you can consider. Then there is more reservation that you need every bit of mana so you can actually pre-throw your mines. You can't go unique chest anymore, or at least not realistically, maybe in endgame, but you really want that evasion, energy shield, body armor to scale your escape artist with, which means you're not going to get the +2 corruption that a Cloak of Flame would have provided pretty easily, quote unquote. You're going to be way tankier in endgame. It's going to be great once you're there. Damage is going to be a little bit different. You're basically just going to have to scale every multiplier that you can, but that was kind of already the case. A big deal is also Sandstorm Visage is a lot rarer now. So one of your biggest power spikes was getting Sandstorm Visage. So I don't know how rare it's going to be, but they did emphasize it's going to be rarer. So your big power spike might happen a lot later. So Maralene's is also going to happen way later. So yeah, Saboteur, completely dead, destroyed. Don't use it. Always use Trickster. Number 2, Archmage. Archmage also got nerfed. The biggest nerf here was Inspiration Support. Now, Inspiration Support, if you guys don't know, used to give you reduced mana cost. Now it gives you less mana cost. Now, a lot of PoE players are trained to think that multipliers are always better. But in this case, going down, it's actually worse because reduced is additive, which means it's better and better the lower you get. Our mana cost used to be around about 100. We could very easily kind of adjust it to fit Kitava's first. Now it's going to be 200, which is just going to be a little bit more annoying on the mana. In general, I don't know if this is actually going to matter, especially once you have your Watcher's Eye with something like mana recoup. But those kind of things are going to be a lot more important. Maybe even going to keep your mana flask for longer, although it's not that much. You might have to maybe respect mana regen a little bit more. We'll have to see. So in order to compensate a little bit for that, what I did is I actually took Dreamer. This is obviously not going to be in there once you go for the other version that we're going to talk about in a second. I also took these small nodes right here. Basically, every bit of reduced mana cost you're now going to want. And also, once again, Divine Blessing has been removed. So if you actually used that before on a offensive aura, for example, cut it for Eternal Blessing. I was already using Eternal Blessing with Purity of Elements right here. So it's not really any change, but I completely removed that from the guide, obviously, so that is not an option anymore. Taste of Hate is nerfed, so no more Taste of Hate. And then, incredibly important, if you were following the other POB, right? If you were following my POB where I respec into Lore Weave Eternal Damnation, do not do this anymore. It is outdated. You cannot use it anymore. Eternal Damnation now has your power charges and endurance charges gets removed. And that means that Hierophant can't use it anymore. On the good side, though, endurance charges are now way, way, way better. So you can also see that as a buff. But yeah, once you're in endgame, Lore Weave, Eternal Damnation is not really on the board anymore. You can go Impulse Us, but later you'll probably want something more defensive. Either way, that is basically a big deal. But on PoE Ninja, I'm sure people actually play the build. We'll find new solutions to that. So yeah, all in all, Archmage is the least affected of the bunch. Archmage is still going to be incredibly strong. Plus, just so you know, over on max roll, I know that it looks like it's still a Ball Lightning Hierophant. However, I did edit some stuff. As you can see right here, Ice Nova Frostbolt. This is the build that I really like. So Ball Lightning is basically for leveling. And then later, you will respec. I added a section here, transformation into Ice Nova Frostbolt. This is basically similar to what I said in this video back then. And I also linked to the video once again if you want to watch that. This is just going to guide you transition from Ball Lightning to Ice Nova Frostbolt. I didn't want to completely rework it because I didn't want you to sit in Merc Lab for 5 hours having to farm for Ice Nova. So Ball Lightning is still there. Ice Nova Frostbolt is now optional on top. Would highly recommend Ice Nova Frostbolt if you haven't watched that yet. But yeah, now then let's talk about Toxic Rain. So the pathing for totem builds has changed. This whole cluster here got removed. A lot of people said, oh my god, we lost the totem. Not true. Totem is here. Okay, this is the new cluster, which in a lot of ways, very good. We don't have to path all the way over there anymore. It's pretty damn good. We did lose Golem's Blood, but it wasn't worth it in general. So the flexibility on the passive tree, there's a lot of points we can fill out. You could go for a medium cluster if you wanted to. So in general, that is a buff. However, now you lose the elemental resistances for totems. There was a note here that is now allocated here called Ironwood, which used to give 30% Ellie res for totems. Ellie res totems start out with 40. You want to get it to 75, so you need 4 of these modifiers that give you +2 Ellie res. You find them on jewels. These are now mandatory. So life, totem res, and then get the rest on top. In theory, the points that you save more than make up for this. So we're still in buff territory. On top of that, the Taunt Mastery is back, right? We got it again. We got Totem Taunt. Great stuff. However, we did lose Taste of Hate. And Taste of Hate was quite a big deal because we don't do any armor on this version. Now, this is way harder on the Explosive Arrow build than on the Toxic Rain build because the Toxic Rain build is intrinsically already well set up against most things because you have Petrified Blood and extremely good recovery. But in general, I would still say it's an overall nerf. However, for leveling, it's going to feel a lot better because once again, you're saving so many points. Your point efficiency is now way, way, way up. Now, you also want to go Cloak of Flame if Lightning Coil is super rare. We don't really know. They didn't nerf Lightning Coil and Cloak of Flame, so I'm a little bit concerned that maybe they're making it rarer. Just so you know, we're not really doing much with evasion or armor, just like a little bit, so the base is not as important. Cloak of Flame and Lightning Coil are mostly interchangeable. Now, the build that lost the most, though, has to be Explosive Arrow. Now, we didn't lose as much as Champion because Champion lost its whole ascendancy, basically its whole ascendancy. The pathing is not as much of an upside here because we already had a pretty good pathing down there. That's the first thing. Taunt Mastery is back, which is huge, don't get me wrong. The Ellie Res is very easy to fix. You don't need to get it on Jewels. You just take the 2 points right here. But here the problems begin. Determination nerf is really hard on you. Armor version that I have right now here, which is the cookie cutter version, is nerfed. Your Fizz hit will go down significantly. So at some point, you probably want to look into a Lightning Coil. Lightning Coil is going to be huge. On this build, you definitely want a Lightning Coil, not a Cloak of Flame, because of the base type. You get a ton of evasion, a ton of armor. You also want to look into Endurance Charges because you don't get them anymore from Enduring Cry. They reworked it. So what you're going to need is probably a small cluster jewel with Enduring Composure, which is going to be hard because the build is already kind of strapped for points, as you can see right here, because it has so much pathing to do. So yeah, the defenses, if you were already unhappy with them, probably not going to be the build for you. If you were already fine with them, now you get Totem Taunt. If you play a little bit more careful, you should be fine. In general, Explosive Arrow has not been looking too hot lately, especially with the tier 17 changes where totems just get absolutely one-shot. So we'll have to look into whether they actually fix that in tier 17s. Currently, Ballistas and even some minions are just not made for that kind of content. But yeah, that's about it. All the links to the guides are down below in the description because people always asking about PoBs. They're here in the middle of the guide description. Once again, yes, I know the PoBs and what's in here is not going to be exactly one-to-one. The PoB is just there for a reference point. You should be following the max roll. With that said, whatever you guys are choosing to start with, I hope you guys have a good league start. In general, I might revisit some of these builds eventually, but we'll have to see. And since I still don't have a slogan, see you next time.